Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. This week, we are pleased to present our forum, The Culture of Entrepreneurialism, in partnership with the Entrepreneurs Organization of Columbus, with support from Columbus College of Art and Design. Please help me welcome a new face to Columbus and someone you should know, the new president of Columbus College of Art and Design, Tom White.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today with all of you at the Metropolitan Club and this very exciting group of people here to my right. So as most of you know, I came from Los Angeles, city of stars, to Columbus, the city of all stars. As Mark Kvamme once said to me, CCAD is one of the oars in the water, rowing the boat of Columbus toward national recognition and prominence. CCAD is proud to support the mission of the Columbus Metropolitan Club by presenting people and ideas for community conversation on topics of importance to our region here. The gifted individuals we're about to hear from today are visionaries. See what happens? It makes an impact. They're an interesting mix of speakers who each bring vast knowledge of business startup and the many potholes and pitfalls that lie ahead for the entrepreneur. They grow businesses, really interesting businesses in Columbus, that bring great value to huge audiences. They grow them fast. They inspire us. In fact, two of them are also our board members at CCAD. Please welcome, starting at the near far end of the table, the far end of the table, co-founder of Drive Capital, former head of Jobs Ohio, and partner at Sequoia Capital, among many other positions, Mark Kvamme. Co-founder of Print Syndicate and Ticket Fire, Tanisha Robinson. Founder, CEO, and inventor of Univenture and many other companies, Ross O. Youngs. And our host and moderator, former reporter and president of Fleisher Communications Group, Marcy Fleisher. Marcy, the podium is yours. Please help us welcome all of our speakers.
Thank you, Tom, for the introduction, and thank you to the Columbus Metropolitan Club for asking me to moderate today's panel. I had an opportunity to speak to all three panelists. We're in for an interesting half hour. Our subject today is a personal one for me. When I left my reporting position at Channel 10 14 years ago, and it has been that long, I never dreamed of opening my own business. But 8 years later, my company, Fleisher Communications Group, a PR firm with an emphasis on earned media, continues to thrive. I suspect I am not the only accidental entrepreneur here today. Along the way, I found what I needed to grow my business: incredible mentors, a talented workforce, support services, affordable office space, and all of that combined with a whole lot of luck, hard work, and perseverance. Based on my personal experience, I considered Columbus an ideal place to open a business. I was honestly stunned to learn not only is Columbus not ranked high in terms of business startups, but in fact, we are near the bottom. Economist Bill LaFayette of Regionomics shared rather abysmal statistics with the CMC audience at his annual economic forecast last January. He noted that out of 100 largest metros in the U.S., Columbus ranks 75th in the percentage of people in the workforce who are self-employed. Columbus ranks 80th in the percentage of small business firms employing fewer than 20 people, and 82nd in the birth rate of small businesses. Among all 363 metros in the U.S., Columbus's climate for small independent retail ranks 350th. Skeptical that perhaps the criteria used to determine these statistics were in some way flawed, I looked up a few other best startup lists. Among them, I reviewed the Forbes Best Place to Launch a Startup annual list and Entrepreneur Magazine's Best U.S. Cities for Startups. Each outlet has its own use and own set of criteria to determine their rankings. However, the one consistency in all of these lists is Columbus is nowhere to be found. And while we aren't surprised when cities like Seattle or San Francisco and Denver make these lists, you might be surprised to learn that Cheyenne, Wyoming, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and Missoula, Montana all land in the top 20. Again, Columbus doesn't come close to making the cut. The results lend themselves to a lot of questions. What makes other cities more likely to spawn business startups? Is there something in our culture that actually discourages new startups? Can it be that Midwesterners are more risk-averse? And does this have a real impact on the establishment of new business ventures? And perhaps most importantly, how do we turn this around? I turn to our panelists today to help us get some of these answers. Each of these panelists is truly an uber entrepreneur with an impressive track record and successful launches of numerous businesses, and I just learned some unsuccessful launches as well. Welcome again to the three of you, and thank you for joining me in what I now know will be a lively conversation. Mark, I want to start with you. We know you are the former president of Jobs Ohio. You were the Kasich administration's point person when it came to creating a startup-friendly climate, and while you've X'd it out underneath, we do know you're at Drive Capital now, but you have a real sense of what it takes for Columbus to create this kind of climate. What do we have in place now, and what do we have to add to the mix?
Well, first of all, after reading all those stats, I was depressed. Maybe. Anyway, I don't believe that. I think we have something pretty unique here. But I will say there are a couple issues. The one thing, and Tanisha's experienced this, and you know, I'm sure others have too. What's interesting about Columbus is we're big enough to have scale. And people forget that some of the best entrepreneurs on the planet live here. Les Wexner, to mention one, has built some phenomenal companies here that have impact around the country. So the way I look at it is this, is I think it's, as you look at it, I think it's a bit of a cultural thing. As many of you know, I grew up in Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, it is actually a badge of honor to fail. Because if you don't try, if you don't, you know, you got to try. And if you don't try, sometimes you try, when you try, you fail. And so, for example, the first company I started, International Solutions, I was 23 years old after spending 4 years at Apple Computer, and I was going to go be the next Steve Jobs. I went and did it, and grew it to 10, 15 people, and then a recession happened in 1985. And had to close the company down, had to soft land it. Then I went to another company and kind of, as I said, shine my shield and sharpen my sword to go do it again. It was actually a larger company called Wise Technology. But when I went to that other job, they actually saw that as a badge of honor. And I think the difference here, and I think it's changing, by the way. I think it's changing across the state. Probably more so in maybe places like Cincinnati than here, and probably less so in Cleveland. But I think that people here, it's not a badge of honor. It's a, you know, it's a scarlet letter, if you will. So I think what we got to do here is we got to change that. And I think folks like what Tanisha's done is really good. But I mean, the bottom line is failure is a good thing. Because if you don't, you know, try hard, I see a lot of entrepreneurs out there now that I look around the audience. So I think that's the fundamental difference. I bet my career that Columbus is going to be the #1 place to create an entrepreneurial company. So we better get it right. I just think it's going to happen. I think, and we can talk about that later, of all the great things we have. But I think that's the fundamental cultural difference right now.
Tanisha, I read an interview you did last spring, and you talked about all of the positives Columbus has. You talked about the city is affordable. We have a business community that's open. You could walk down the street and you could see people that could help you make a difference. What else have you seen when you're doing business in other markets that they are offering startups that Columbus isn't yet? Are there initiatives, programs that you say we should be doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that funding is still a big issue, and you know, Columbus, like Mark mentioned, is getting better, but over the past several years, it's been a huge challenge. So the banks are starting to get a little bit more aggressive. You know, gone are the days in the 80s when a woman couldn't get a business loan without a man signing, right? So like, there's progress. I think last time that happened was in like 88, you know, so there's definitely progress, but even for our business, we've had to go out of town to raise funds. And, you know, we're thrilled to have Tech Columbus in our round, but we have investors coming in from Boston and Chicago and Las Vegas. You know, Mark and I have a great relationship, and he's given us a lot of insight and help and focus, but, you know, it's not the right fit. We want very deep e-commerce experience, and that's what we're looking for. I think, you know, so that's definitely a hard one, and I think that we also don't have really highly visible big wins. And so it's not part of the narrative of the city that people come here, attempt empires, crash them, or sell them. And so I think that that's a big limitation. So when companies IPO or exit, there's this pool of people who are young and fresh off of a big win that then want to experiment, and I think that that's a piece that's missing in our ecosystem right now.
Russ, you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, you're also an inventor, and you and I talked a little bit before the luncheon started about the role of institutes like the Ohio State University, Battelle, CCAD. We've got these incredible institutions of learning. Are they part of this picture? Should they be teaching in a specific way to encourage the growth of startups?
Well, that's a good question. And I'll be honest, that's going to be hard for me to answer. I'm coming from the entrepreneurial point of view. My interactions with some of these institutions are varied, but they depend upon the business. So I wasn't in those institutions while I tried to start my company, but I've interacted with those institutions. One of our companies is actually using the Ohio State School of Pharmacognosy to do studies on anti-cancer drugs. We've worked with the business school over the years many times. I've gone in there to speak, and I have been able to meet a number of young entrepreneurs coming out of there, and actually funded one of the young entrepreneurs coming out of there to do a startup. So I think, kind of piling on a little bit, and I don't mind piling on, is there is a fear of failure in this area. There is no doubt about that. And we have no real big wins, and I'll add to the big wins, we've had no real big wins that have returned lottery-type money to people here. Because when you take risk and you get rewards, you're more apt to go back out there and take a little more risk. But that's not what's happened here. To Tanisha's point of view, too, some of the funding for her very fast-growing business is coming from out of state. Now, originally, when I brought in a little bit of venture, and I'm not going to call it venture, it was angel capital from Columbus. Back in '88, when I was able to do that, you went to the Columbus Investment Interest Group, and you made a pitch, and people came up and introduced themselves afterward. And you met a lawyer, and you met an accountant, and you met a marketing person, and everyone wanted to do business with you, but you didn't run into investors. So things have changed dramatically, and all of those organizations you talked about, Battelle and Ohio State, they're all working hard at taking innovations from within their operations and bringing them into the entrepreneurial marketplace. And I'm really glad to see that, being able to interact with some of that. But moreover, there's a lack of a solid ecosystem to support entrepreneurialism in this region, and there needs to be much more done to build that and to create that culture around it. Now, we're never going to be Silicon Valley, but there's a lot of opportunities to be something special, to be something different and to have successes.
Silicon Valley.
There you go.
I left that place.
And I see our panelists shaking their heads. So when Ross says we're not going to be Silicon Valley, your expression was, oh, maybe we can be. How can we be? What would we have to put in place? Are the people like the VC people here, the brain trust here?
I mean, again,
risk takers.
being the old guy here, you know, my dad started National Semiconductor in 1967. When he started National Semiconductor, he actually showed me where he built his office, and it was cherry orchards and apricot orchards. I mean, Silicon Valley, until, you know, really the late 70s, early 80s, was really known for apricots and cherries. In fact, where Apple's built is, if you look at, you know, when you look on your Apple computer, it's one Mariani place or something, or one infinite loop now. That's actually built on the Mariani apricot orchard. Anyway, I think if you look at back in '67, there was 100% of his money came from the East Coast. And I think, you know, the folks here mentioned it here, is that, you know, investment's very important. By 1975, when Nolan Bushnell started Atari, half his money came from Silicon Valley, actually a former firm I worked with, Sequoia Capital, and half his money came from the East Coast. Actually, there's funny stories. Nolan Bushnell used to hold his board meetings in a hot tub, and it's kind of a California thing to do. And the California VCs would join him in the hot tub, and the Boston VC would be sitting in a suit on the outside of the hot tub. But I think that's where we are here in Columbus. And I think Tanisha's a great example. She got money from Tech Columbus. She got money from other folks. She and I have been talking a lot. It wasn't the right fit for Drive Capital, but she's building a phenomenal company. She went out and she got money from Tony Hsieh. Can I say who you got money from?
Sure.
Sorry, we're just on TV. And she got money from, you know, outside the region, and because she's building a very attractive business that's growing very, very rapidly. And I think one of the things that Tanisha was able to do, it was able to show these outside investors, no, there's no better place for her to be than in Columbus, Ohio. Because think about it, the retail, you know, the retail nexus of the world here is here. And so I think one of the things we got to do is realize what we do really, really well, and then augment that to the best as we can. I think, you know, this whole idea, and that's why I say don't want to be the next Silicon Valley. I think what's really interesting from a Columbus perspective is the access to world-class large companies. You know, whether it's Nationwide, whether it's, you know, L Brands, whether it's, you know, Huntington Bank, you know, Cardinal Health. The access to these customers is fabulous. And so I think as we look at these entrepreneurs, and what's nice about working here in Columbus, one thing I have found, and a friend of mine used to say so eloquently, is that, you know, Columbus is a place where you can you have enough scale to actually get something done, but it's also, you know, you can call Les Wexner, you can call, you know, Steve Steinauer, you can call. I was with George Barrett last night. All he wanted to do. You guys know George Barrett, you know, the CEO of Cardinal Health, is a phenomenal guitar player. And singer. And so, how long ago? 4 weeks ago, he actually was on stage playing with The Who. We didn't know that about George. Him and Townsend, Pete Townsend. Anyway, where was I? So this is a great place. And I think that we need to be unapologetic about how great a place this is to build a business. Now, are we going to build the next, you know, silicon wafer plant here? You know, probably not. But we have the opportunity to build some world-class technologies. And I'll move one last thing and I'll shut up. A fundamental thing happened in late 2000s, and we all know of it as cloud computing. So Tanisha over here, you go to her office and she's got a bunch of folks sitting on laptops. If Tanisha had started her company 10 years ago, she would have had to have a data center. She would have had to have data center engineers. She would have had a DBAs. She would have had to have this vast group of technologists that were basically only in Silicon Valley. So now she can hire folks out of CCAD working on laptops and then connect to the cloud and have all these cloud-based services. So it's now more important for Tanisha's company to be close to the retail companies, since she's in the e-commerce business, than it is to be close to Silicon Valley. So that's one of the fundamental changes that we're seeing in the region.
Well, and Tanisha, I want to go right to you because you've on record talking about Columbus playing to its strengths. that there may not be a Facebook here or a Twitter here, but fashion-oriented, retail. You've taken great advantage of that. So what's the advice you would give people who want to create a business that is more focused on an industry that fits Columbus?
Yeah, I mean, Columbus provides really powerful logistical advantage, and I think something that a lot of people don't know is that Gap and Lululemon and a lot of brands that don't really have a presence here have distribution centers here because Columbus is so perfectly situated to ship product to customers. And, you know, so for us, it's an easy sell, and we talk about our competitive advantage to our investors, and we view CCAD as a partner because they are our pool of talent and trend spotters that come in and create an immense amount of value through their design and the intellectual property they create for our business. And so, you know, so as we examine the pools of talent, the geographical advantage that we have here, you know, the cost of real estate is very low, and we have, you know, a lot of members of the community that are interested in helping us scale. So Nationwide Realty is our landlord for our new production facility, and they gave us a short-term lease because we're not sure what we need for 10 years, but we know what we need for 2. And so, you know, I would say that in examining that, it's like, okay, so we have really powerful retail outlets and businesses that have scaled in a pretty short time to multi-billion-dollar entities, and a lot of those people have unbelievable expertise and they're willing to hang out. Like Mark said, you know, we had Steve Steinauer himself came through on a tour of our business and then sends his team in, and you know, the top business leaders in our community are always willing to sit down and work with entrepreneurs, in my experience anyway, you know, Nancy Kramer and Tanny Crane, and just really, really brilliant people, because in my view, I'm like, a lot of shit we haven't seen, and we're trying to run our business, and they've seen all this shit before, and they can really help us. And so, you know, and so I think relying on
We're on TV,
yeah.
Tanisha.
That's actually clean for Tanisha.
Yeah. So anyone that knows me knows I can't talk about being an entrepreneur without swearing. So, sorry if you're offended. Sorry, Mom. Okay, she's not going to watch this.
Ross, you and I talked about, okay, we agree the culture needs to change. So how do we put that in place? It's easy to say that, a lot harder to do it.
Well, it's evolutionary rather than revolutionary. You've just got to make some small steps, and I think that the community has made actually some very significant steps over the last 10 years. So I think it's on a good path. I think that, you know, if you want something improved, measure it, focus on it, be proud of it, and I think that you'll see a lot of things come out from that. So I think there's opportunities to really get focused and continue to make this kind of progress. And I'm actually happy to be a part of the community here. I think it can go places, but I just think that there should be goals and objectives that are met. One of the things that we do a lot, and it's done all over the world, and that is you look at job creation. And quite frankly, I'm not too sure that's the best measure of wealth. There may be a better way to measure wealth creation, because the jobs themselves are not going to necessarily bring the resources for the next entrepreneur, but wealth quite possibly can. And you think about some of these recent companies that have been sucked up by Google for $1 billion or other buyers out there, you're talking about 15 people, but you're talking about a wealth that went to those investors and went to those founders that is immense and is going to allow them to do that next thing as well. So I think we need to retool some of our own measurements as to what we use to benefit companies, what we use to measure successes, and I think there's lots of opportunity for that we can focus in this community.
So let's get specific. Objectives, strategies, 2 years, 5 years. Mark, what would you like to see in place, and where should we be?
I actually would like to see 2 or 3 other drive capitals. I think one of the things is, I think it was mentioned here, is the lack of capital. And I think, for example, Rich Longdale's done a great job with NCT. I think, you know, the folks at Draper Triangle out of Pittsburgh have done a good job investing in Ohio. But one of the biggest issues we have is a lack of investors. And I'm really hoping, I mean, what you forget when you work in Silicon Valley, you literally go up and down one road, it's Sand Hill Road, and 51% of the total venture capital on the planet is on that one road. And so that's, everyone talks about, university commercialization. Everyone, brings Stanford up as this amazing university commercialization. Well, the fact is they're a half a mile away, from Sand Hill Road, where all the VCs are. I mean, there's a quid pro quo here. It just works that way. Anyway, so I think that's the number one thing. But the only way we're going to do that, I'm hoping, knock on wood, that Drive Capital has some success. If we have success, then it will attract other folks. I hope folks like Tanisha, go out and build multi-$100-million companies, because if we have several of those that are created in this region, I also agree, as you said very eloquently, that we need the wealth creation. We need the entrepreneurs to stay here. And by the way, some of that is tax policy. It's other things too. It's not just, but we need them to stay here. I mean, again, I hate to put this back, but just think of, once, L Brand started, or Limited at the time, became X size, and then Les decided to go move to, Florida. That would have been a disaster for this area. Or, Cardinal Health did the same thing. I mean, that just would have been a disaster. So, anyway, so I think that I would say is the most important thing. The only way we're going to get that is by showing success with success. And I believe, I'd actually point towards Indianapolis right now. They've been very fortunate. The Exact Target was bought for $2.8 billion. The CEO just recently stepped down, and he's looking at doing new things. Supposedly 40 new companies have already been started from Exact Target. You look at Angie's List, the same thing. You look at, I think it's HubSpot, one other one there. You look at what Groupon is doing in Chicago. That's what we need.
What about smaller businesses? There's been a lot of focus on, huge companies, the corner coffee shop, a delivery service, a restaurant. What should we be doing to encourage those types of business, which are equally as important, if not more so?
I think you said it. We need to create wealth here, because you need to get people here, because at the corner restaurant, it costs $200,000 to start. Sure. How are restaurants started? Friends and family. How are these things started? That's the way it's done. I mean, you've got some great, look what Cameron Mitchell's done over the last, 10, 20 years. You look at what Chris Crater's doing with Harvest Pizza and Sycamore Cafe and those places. I mean, we have the entrepreneurs doing those sorts of places, but in order for them to do it, they need to have capital partners. And I hate to always come back to that, because it's kind of the business I'm in, but at the end of the day, that's the lubricant that really gets this thing going.
Tanisha, well, you said business, the powers that be in Columbus are very accessible. What else would you like them to be doing in order to encourage people to come to Columbus? Not just the born and bred, but the ones, who may be leaving other cities to come and start it here.
Well, I think, to bring it back to capital, that's a big issue as entrepreneurs go in search of believers. If you have a big pool of potential believers, it's more likely to convert. And so, Tech Columbus has gotten a lot more savvy, and they're making a lot, there's a lot more money flowing out of there, and Drive is new, and NCT is good. But, we need a much larger pool of potential believers, and also potential, people that can be additive. So one of, for us, for one of our criteria for our investors is we wanted people that have a deep understanding of scaled e-commerce to $1 billion. And so I would say, though, I think there's an element of the discourse both in small and big businesses. So for small, we talk about Columbus being a great food city, but there's not a whole lot of narrative around the entrepreneurs who have put their life savings in, or their friends and family money, to build that great corner coffee shop that everyone loves. And I think so tying the entrepreneurial narrative to what makes Columbus awesome, I think would be really productive. And then for our business, this Print Syndicate is a swing for the fences, and we are trying to scale very, very fast. We hope to be above $100 million within the next few years, and there's not, and some people think that that's adorable, or like, oh, look at you little entrepreneurs out there trying to build your little business. You have no idea, guys. Just ask my wife later, like I call her raging sometimes, but, I think that people to be excited about attempts at empire building, but also be willing to absorb you know, some major failures if they happen. And so I think just having people believe is a really big deal, and because it's so intense and so difficult to attempt to lift a thing off the ground, and then to scale it is a whole other issue. And so I think kind of taking people seriously when they're trying to scale an empire versus you know, being dismissive or like, oh, well, that's not possible, or have you thought about not trying so hard or not going for such a big thing, you know, and trying to kind of diminish that. And I think, so, you know, there's definitely a cultural scene where it's, and I would say the vast majority of entrepreneurs I know are wildly competitive, and I have a great cohort here of people, and we're competitive, and we collaborate, and, you know, Ryan Vessler from Homage, and Liz Lessner from you know, the Columbus Food League, but you know, but it's very hard when there's not a giant cohort of people who are all trying to build $100 million businesses, or, you know, go to 9 figures to sort of compete against and share experiences with. And you know, so I think that's another challenge that you know, places like New York and Boston and Silicon Valley have as an advantage. So.
Hold that thought. I just want the audience to know that in a couple minutes we'll be taking questions. So if you've got one in your mind, it'll be the opportunity to do that shortly. A final thought, and all of you kind of jump in one at a time. Can this be taught? We talked about, and I think it was Mark or Ross, how at the School of Business, we're teaching students how to participate and contribute to a terrific business. Can you teach people the skills they are going to need to operate and own and form a business? Or is this experience, and you're laughing, so you must be relating to this?
Oh, yeah. So I think the best test to see if someone could be an entrepreneur is if I were to take your wallet and your phone and your keys and tell you to survive on your wits for a week and see how you do. And I know I would roll up and probably have a few $100s in my pocket after the experience and be fine. And so I think just the idea of surviving on your wits is a really big thing. But I think that there's a lot of aspects of being an entrepreneur that no class or leadership group can prepare you for. So we have over 90 people on our team now after under 2 years in business, and you know, there's nothing ever that has ever prepared me for feeling the weight of responsibility of everyone's rent and car payments, and we've got people getting married and buying houses, and I'm just like, oh shit. So
That's 2.
and that's 2, that's 3, I think it's 3.
Oh, 3. So, you're right, you said, yeah.
But there is really kind of nothing there's no leadership book that can sort of prepare anyone for that kind of pressure. And so, you know, I mean, I actually think it's a terrible idea to be an entrepreneur. I only do it because I'm totally unemployable. And I have a really bad attitude and problems with authority. But I think, you know, for people that are really passionate about an idea and about a solution or about a product, one is, can you even sell it, right? Like, I've seen passion behind terrible ideas, right? So that's a huge challenge. And then, you know, and then trying to figure out and put all the pieces together and have the humility to ask for help all the time and fail constantly. So we make horrible decisions every day. And just have to absorb and learn and then keep going. And I think that, again, it's this tolerance for failure and being able to withstand that, and that's really hard to teach. So
I'm going to jump right in there. I agree completely with Tanisha, how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. I mean, nobody should go out and be an entrepreneur because they think it's an easy road. It's a tough road, and it takes a lot of time and effort. But when you talk about what we need to teach here, it's not what we need to teach to get entrepreneurs. It's what we need to teach to get supporters of entrepreneurs. It's what we need to teach to be able to create a little risk. It's hard to believe that Ohio used to be one of the most wealthiest parts of this country. There's a lot of wealth here. There's not a lot of risk-taking. I know multimillionaires that would rather have their money in a bank earning 1% than to give 5% of it out there in the entrepreneurial environment, where they may earn more money on that, even with failures, than they could earn on that 1%. There needs to be an acceptance that it's okay to take those risks, it's okay to fail, and you know what? It should be a badge. It should be something you should be proud of. I tried to support this entrepreneur, it didn't go well, or I tried to support this entrepreneur and made a ton. And that's what we should be talking about, and that's what we should be supporting and creating, because there's loads of opportunities around here.
The only thing I'd possibly add is that I've been fortunate enough to work with some world-class folks who have built multi-billion-dollar businesses. I'd say to the one of them, none of them started it to be an entrepreneur. None of them started it to even start a company. I mean, I remember when Jerry Yang and David Filo walked in my office and they said, hey, people are sharing websites with us, and we just built this little web page to help people find the websites they're looking for. That was Yahoo. I remember when Chad and Steve came into my office to talk about, hey, it's really hard to share videos, and I want to share videos with Steve just had a child and wanted to share videos with his parents, so they created YouTube. The great companies are created because the entrepreneur has a undying passion for solving the problem, and they just have to do it. And I think one of the mistakes people take away from the Valley is, the streets are paved with gold and everyone does this, that. It's just not the case. It's got this ecosystem for finding and cultivating passionate people that are really focused on solving a very, very precise, specific problem. And then just so happens 2 other people, 4 other people, 6 other people, 12 other people all share that problem. Remember, Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook because he wanted to get his girlfriend back. Okay, that's why he started it. Okay, he did not start it to become a multi-trillionaire with a billion customers. He started it with one very focused passion, and that's what you look at all of these different folks. That's what it's all about. And it's kind of, I'm a new entrepreneur. Chris Olson, my partner, and I decided to put our careers at risk and start a venture capital fund here in Columbus, Ohio. And I will tell you, many of our folks think we're crazy, but we believe in the region, we believe in the area, and we've been able to attract some world-class folks here as well. Actually, a son of Columbus, I see his mother out there, Ned Schwartz. We were able to bring a world-class guy back here, and we're building this firm. But you have to, just read the papers. You can see a lot of naysayers out there about what Drive Capital's doing. I was actually reminded, the last time I spoke here, I had protesters. So I'm a little disappointed you guys didn't have that this time. But no, that's what it's all about. It's about passion. It's about believing in what you're doing. And as Tanisha said, we fail every single day. Every single day. Failure is part of making things, changing things, and that's what it's all about.
Thank you. I see we do have people in line. It's a tradition to take questions. If you would refrain from editorial comments, but certainly ask your question, state your name. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Mike Davis with Junior Achievement here in Central Ohio. And we work every day with kids trying to get the mindset of understanding how business works. And so without going off on a soapbox, I will share that what we see is it doesn't really matter if what socioeconomic group the kid's from or what they're doing. It's when they're exposed and when they get to explore things and when they get to experience them and drive them. It's amazing to see how common they can get passionate about the thing that they want to drive. And so one of the things that we talk about is the passion, the business of kids' passion. And Mark, you were just referencing it. Yeah. And for us, it seems like that's the trigger of making sure kids and our community gets the mindset around how do we drive towards the passion that we want to go. And so what I'd like to just know from the three of you is, at what point did you find the light that went off to drive you towards where you're going, and have you learned a lot since?
So for me, I was 9 years old. I opened a lemonade stand. I had zero cost of goods because my parents paid for everything. And I thought it was really cool because I could change my sign and I get different kind of customers in. And actually, think we've spoken in the past, right? I'm a huge fan of junior achievement. In fact, when I was in high school, I joined a junior achievement group, and that's when I realized I didn't know what that was called at the time when I was 9. It was called marketing. I was the VP of marketing of my junior achievement company, and that's where I really decided and it got my passion for marketing. But I got to tell you, I mean, part of it's in the culture. It's in the water. Where I grew up in Silicon Valley, my dad's a founder and an entrepreneur, and every one of my friends' dads were founders and entrepreneurs. So that's a big part of it as well. But if you want to ask, just one last thing is, if you want to teach your kids entrepreneurship, have them open up a lemonade stand in front of your house, because you learn a lot real fast, what works and what doesn't work.
I ended up having a couple jobs that went south, so they were either closing or in the process of having problems. And the passion came from, gee, I've done a lot of neat things for other companies. Could I possibly do it for myself? And I was naive enough to believe I could, and it actually did work. But that's one of the things that really got me going, is I probably would have been fine working for other people my entire career. I enjoyed what I did. I was always good at it. But it came to a point to where, gee, I had to design and create my own job. And since then, I've been designing and creating lots of jobs for me to do. And I love, when you talk about passion, I love that everything's morphed from simple plastics to potentially the next major cures of diseases on the planet. That really takes the passion to a whole nother level, when all of a sudden you could be involved in multiple cures for diseases.
So I'll be quick. I grew up in a small town in Missouri where obviously I fit in perfectly. And I was second of 7. My family had no money, and so I had to hustle in the streets. So I had a grass cutting business, and the first summer I did all the jobs myself, and the second summer I hired neighborhood kids and paid them. I had 4 guys working for me, and I just sold the jobs, and so I learned a lot about marketing. And and at that time, the money I made was a mechanism to do cool stuff. And I view my current business building efforts as really a mechanism for impact at this point. And so, I'm a huge believer that money magnifies impact, and I view our company as a lever for impact, as well as hopefully the proceeds of what we do to hopefully, positively change the community. So,
Question?
Yes, hi. My name is Ryan Schick. I'm the new city council created Small Business Concierge. I want to turn the question to government and ask each one of you what gaps do you see the city government filling in a position like mine? Because to describe it just basically in short, I am a public advocate. Not only am I road mapping individuals, my ideal client would be a single mother who's trying to do something at night, but walk her through city, county, state, local, and federal processes. But what else can the city government be doing to help bring the jobs and to effectuate what you all want to accomplish here in Columbus?
I'll jump on that first. You look at some of the successful cities and what they've been able to do to attract businesses or create a culture. We talked about Indianapolis earlier. It is a capital for sports, types of sports. And the reality of it is that was an effort and that was a focus. So the first question you've got to ask yourself, if you want to have more drive capitals here, what is their pain? What would attract them here? Would it be the investment public could invest in them? Is it the possibility of access to entrepreneurs? Is there a way to focus in on that and create structures to support what they need, what their pain is, what we need, what our pain is, and find a nexus where everything just fits together? I think there's that possibility. And it will cost resources. I tell you, one of the biggest pains I believe out there is the belief, I believe that government has its place when it comes to infrastructure that nobody else can afford and support. And some of that infrastructure is beneficial for the whole community and beneficial for our futures. So bet on some things, put some money where you need it in order to move things forward in a particular path. And in the case of creating an environment around here, I think there's opportunities to do that.
We've been proactive in pursuing the city, and they've made a lot of introductions for us. We have job creation tax credits, and 2020 has been a great connector, but I don't know that everyone knows that 2020 can really open a lot of doors and help get stuff done. I would say that kind of one of the best things the city could do is add fiber everywhere. It's a huge... So people clapping, yeah. But in terms of trying to compete with other cities that do have fiber everywhere, for us, as we move giant art files, it's a really big deal, and it would at least allow us to level the playing field in that territory, because these slow connections is a huge limitation to thinking about high tech, or we're a fashion tech kind of startup, and so that would be a big one.
No, I mean, I think the city's done a lot, and I think you see it happening, and I'm a big proponent of what Columbus has done. I think I'd say two or three things real quickly. One is, and Tanisha's kind of said it, one is, one of the problems when you have fast-growing companies is they really want 18-month, 24-month leases. It's really hard to get a 24-month lease here in Columbus. I mean, everyone wants a 5-year lease. I don't know what the city can do with that. I'm just saying, just structurally, that's an issue. Second thing, if you want more capital to come here, let's get a direct flight to San Francisco. I mean, I've had several VCs come here, and not all VCs own their own plane. It's hard to get here. It's a pain. I had Venki, Venki Ganesian, one of the top VCs from Menlo, and he actually landed, he finally got it, he goes, Mark, man, that's a pain in the rear to get here. Well, if it's a pain in the rear to get here, he ain't coming back. I guess those are my two primary ones. But I actually think, I just hit again what Tanisha just said. If I was going to pick one thing, I'd pick infrastructure, fiber infrastructure. I mean, Kansas City's doing some really cool stuff in that area, and Chicago's already got it. Pittsburgh's already got it because of Carnegie Mellon. I mean, our internet here is, I feel like I'm in Silicon Valley in 1998. So we need to pick it up.
Hi, I'm Bill LaFayette. I am an entrepreneur myself and an economist. And I'd like to kind of change the conversation a little bit. I'd like for us to think about not the supply of entrepreneurial businesses, but the demand for entrepreneurial businesses. And what are the ways that we could have people patronize the coffee shop on the corner rather than the certain unnamed national, international coffee shop? And how can we make it easier for small businesses to crack these big businesses in town, for those of us who don't have dinner with Les Wexner?
The two things I'd say is, one is if you want to see the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Columbus alive and well, go to Mission Coffee off of High Street. That is one of the hubs of entrepreneurship here in Columbus. I actually think you brought a very good point up. By the way, I don't know too many economist entrepreneurs, but I'm just saying. But that's a good mix. I think Columbus is one of the best places to build a business, and it's much better than many of our Midwestern counterparts. I won't name names, but we've now moved 3 companies here, and I would agree that the raw technology entrepreneurial ecosystem isn't as vibrant as it could be here. But when you bring entrepreneurs from Baltimore and Green Bay and Louisville, and we're about ready to bring another one out, to here, and they see how they can build a company here. So, for example, I mean, these are companies we funded. The first one we funded in April, they now have 45 people. The second one we funded in June, they now have 20 going to 35 people. And the last one we just brought in we just brought this company in from Louisville. He came with 4 people. There are already 14 people. You can actually staff and create companies here because you have J.P. Morgan here, you have Nationwide here. You have Huntington, you have these great corporations where they have very large workforces that are service-oriented, tech-oriented workforces that you can actually, they don't want to work on this just at Huntington, they want to go to a startup. And I will tell you, in my opinion right now, out of all the major Midwestern cities, this is one of the best, if I'd probably put it behind Chicago. As far as building your tech company is Columbus, Ohio.
Do we have time for one more question?
I'm Kevin Bragg. I'm an attorney with Shoemaker, Loop & Kendrick. And my question is going to have to do with entrepreneurism and financial services. I've kind of just been keeping an eye on this ever since the New York Stock Exchange, back around the year 2000, went from being a clubby, elite social club to a publicly traded company. And so I read with great interest the most recent Michael Lewis book, Flash Boys, about the fellas who are creating a new exchange essentially to compete with the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, the IEX. And my question is, and I do have a personal interest in this, is that entrepreneurism such as that in that book and that we've seen over the past 2 years, is that something that still would be limited to, for instance, a financial center like New York City or Chicago or London, or is that the kind of thing that would fit in well here in Columbus?
Well, the third largest exchange on the planet was created during that period of time, was created in Kansas City. BATS. The BATS exchange was created in Kansas City. No, it can be created anywhere. And that's the beauty of what I said before about the cloud. I mean, quite frankly, Tanisha's company 8 years ago, 10 years ago, couldn't have been done in Columbus. She could not have grown. She would have had to move to Silicon Valley. And so what's going on now with the cloud, with those kind of capabilities, you can really create that company or pretty much any company anywhere.
Once more, thanks to our sponsor, Columbus College of Art and Design, our partners, the Entrepreneur Organization of Columbus, and our speakers, Mark Kvamme, Tanisha Robinson, Rosso Youngs, and Marcy Fleisher. And thanks to all of you for being here. We look forward to seeing you again at CMC soon.